Is it 59?
Welcome to episode 59.
Ish.
Maybe. I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I don't do those kind of numbers.
No, numbers is tricky.
That's
my job, and I've dropped the ball. Let's talk about limping.
Okay.
It's something that everyone has at some point. They roll an ankle, they're in a moon boot, they're on crutches. But there's a lot of flow-on effects that that hang around once you're back to what you assume is normal walking that can affect things pretty badly.
Yeah, it's a much more magnified much more magnified outcome than you might think. So, for instance,
there's a real flow-on effect.
I was running this morning, and I've got some hangover calluses on my left midfoot from toe shoe running, which I'm now sadly retired from.
Oh.
Yeah, because I was giving this, like, if this is my foot, it was just giving me this really bad calluses just here where the big toe was kind of, well, it doesn't really count, but it was in around there. And so it's small calluses, not that painful, but that significantly changed my gait. I was trying to still run beautifully, and so I've ended up going, you know what, the price I'm paying for this is actually not worth it, so I'll just run in some other shoes.
Yep.
But yeah, small little callus, and I had different calf soreness, I had a little bit of knee soreness. It went straight up the chain, just because every step I was taking, I was trying to avoid that sore bit. And it's really subconscious. It's not a thing that you can consciously control very well.
No, you can't. Yeah, which is why it's such a big issue. So,
and that's now on a scale of limps, that's a very low end limp. That, like, I was probably changing my loading by 3 mil, or 2 degrees.
2 degrees, yeah.
Yeah.
I think let's work our way up the kinetic chain and talk about the issues that we have. So, say you're in a boot for a month, or you've rolled your ankle and you're on crutches for a couple of weeks, or whatever happens. Let's start with the big toe, which I think is the most underrated joint in the entire body. Yeah. And work our way up.
Do you know we've got an athlete coming in? I spoke to her yesterday on the phone. She's having her said such bad. She's having a midfoot reconstruction, which I had not.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so we're going to see what we can do to help out. And part of that is they're fusing the big toe joint. So she'll have no... there'll be no toe dorsiflexion. She won't be able to... and she's hoping to still run, which will be interesting. And we'll see what we can... Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So, when we roll through the gait cycle, that big toe provides all the propulsion into hip extension.
It's such a big deal.
So you need to be able to get through that and push through the ground, if you will, and to be able to get through that. And so if you have a tight... And so if you're walking... What happens is... Sorry for the podcast. What happens when you're walking is your feet...
Yeah, this is on video, people. You might want to...
Normally we roll through the foot and start either from the heel when we're walking or from the midfoot when we run, and roll through the big toes and through those last two toes. When we limp, though, what happens, and after the limp as well, we subconsciously kind of pick the foot up as opposed to roll through. So the foot's going to land flat, and instead of rolling through those two toes, it'll be like lifted up, kind of like a club foot, if you will, just sort of dragging it up behind it. And so what happens over time is all those joints in the foot tighten up. And the big one is the big toe. And so we don't get that dorsiflexion to the big toe, and we can't get that full range of motion to propel ourselves.
And we'll have to link to there's a lot of good videos about the windlass mechanism in the foot. And so how it works is if you want to create rigidity and stiffness within the foot to propel yourself off the ground, the foot's amazing because the way the foot changes from an absorption machine to a propulsion machine is incredible.
It's both a spring and a pillow at the same time.
It's just genius. Like, it's so cool. But dorsiflexion is actually what winds up the ability of the arch to kind of lock,
and the plantar fascia to create tension. Yeah.
That's created by the toe.
The big toe dorsiflexion.
Yeah.
Got there. So as you push that big toe into the ground, your plantar fascia locks up, the arch locks in position, and that then transfers the force.
So if that's messed up, that's bad. But even worse in some ways, if you're in a big old moon boot for 6 weeks, you're walking around with one hip higher than the other. You're not getting full hip extension. You're
broken. I was going to go joint by joint.
Sorry.
And you just gave me a beautiful segue into the ankle, and then you just jumped ahead to the hip. Let's go ankle first.
I'm sorry.
So that's okay.
I'll just be quiet.
No, so I'd like you to jump in on this, actually. Let's talk about ankles. So big toe dorsiflexion is huge.
Yeah.
But then if you're in that boom boot as well, and so the muscles of your foot will also atrophy as well.
Yeah.
So you get this wasting in through those muscles that were controlling and creating that rigidity through the foot. And so tib post, all those little flexor hallucis longus and all those guys, they'll stiffen up and
all the little
atrophy.
intrinsics.
Yeah. And so then with that windlass mechanism, this is the segue I had, but now I lost, you can't transfer the force into the ankle joint.
Yeah.
And so you now have a stiff ankle and tight Achilles as well.
Mm.
And so the Achilles, I'll just keep going.
Yeah, because I'm really scared of ruining everything.
So the Achilles is like this rope.
The Achilles is awesome.
And it just pulls on the Achilles and pulls on the calf and elbow via the calf and propels us into our stride. And so if you get a tight ankle joint from not using it and you get that stiffness, we now can't, like the foot, we can't absorb energy through it, and now we also can't create energy because we're not getting into good positions. So we're not having a sprung loaded foot to hit the ground.
Yeah, which is not good. Can I go up the chain now?
Please.
And then the flow on into effect then into the knee is obviously problematic because the single biggest predictor for knee problems and knee soreness is lack of dorsiflexion. Like if your ankle doesn't bend properly, that kinetic energy gets slammed up into the knee because it's not being absorbed at the ankle, changes how you move, and all of a sudden you've potentially got knee drama.
Whether it be tendon, tracking, even ACL things can be linked to that as well. Yeah.
And we talk about knees a lot, so I don't want to belabor the knee thing. I'd like to jump straight ahead into the hip flexor.
Take it away, keep rolling.
And what you really notice if you have some level of restriction at your Achilles, whether it's a rolled ankle, inability to toe off, whatever it may be, what becomes really rapidly apparent is how much that the psoas and rec fem as well, and iliacus, the whole hip flex, they just lock up because you're not taken through that range of motion.
So instead of pushing and hip extending, you now instead you're picking that foot up via the hips, and so it's a flexion dominant pattern as opposed to an extension dominant pattern.
And so we look like genius, like we look like Nostradamus or something. When someone will come in, and they'll be in a moon boot, and I'll be like, "Is it, how's your back?" It's like, "Oh, how did you know?" Like, because you're in a moon boot. Like you're walking weird. You've got a leg length discrepancy that's been manufactured, and
you've got a kilo and a half around your ankles. Also, you're picking that up with yourself. So not only is the psoas doing all the work, it's now doing more work because it's lifting a heavier foot.
Yeah,
because of that boot.
Yeah,
and so
although the boots, I mean, are they that much heavier than stupid basketball shoes?
Probably not that much. They're definitely.
Have we done an episode about basketball shoes?
We've done a proper video which will be linked. Yeah,
okay, yeah,
I've already done that.
Yeah,
we should riff on it though for a while at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so psoas will tighten up.
Yeah.
And that will then create some rotation through the pelvis, create an anterior tilt, which is then going to switch off your glutes, potentially tighten up your hamstrings, and then jam up your lower back.
There's all sorts of things. The best example I had an athlete, this is a long time ago, and he was a 6'5", 16-year-old boy, and he had 16 centimeters of dorsiflexion. That's knee to wall. That's measuring how well the ankle bends. Yep. So 16 centimeters is outstanding.
That's gold star. Yeah.
And 5 centimeters on the bad ankle. And when you watch him run, you could see it because he was asymmetrical. And
that was a carryover from a really bad ankle roll like a year ago, like 12 months ago.
And so the physio standard, which I wholeheartedly believe in, is it's got to be symmetrical or very close to.
Within 2 centimeters is usually the standard, I think.
And ideally, minimum double digits. Sometimes for really short people, that's achievable.
We'll often screen a younger kid and
because that's the first thing we screen. Because I think it's the lead domino.
Yeah. If you can't get your dorsiflexion right,
you're not going to squat right. You're not going to sprint right. You're not going to land right. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah.
It interrupts all the other learning we're going to do and everything else. But we'll have our young kids with the shorter tibias. They'll come in and getting 8, and they're like, "You're only 12 years old. That's pretty decent.
Fine.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's fine." But yeah, so I think the big takeaway is that sometimes people will try and start, their return to play might have running start before they're able to walk normally or squat symmetrically. I think the big thing is don't feed ground reaction forces, don't feed like impact into the equation until you've restored symmetry to your body. If your body's asymmetrical, you are begging for drama, and you're actually, and in your haste, you're going to slow down the rehab process. Yeah. You'll get to the first or second phase quicker, but you'll actually get to the return to play slower
because you'll have to spend a lot of time in the middle going backwards, forwards, spinning your wheels.
And you're rolling the dice so it's slower, but you're rolling the dice on maybe creating some actual wear and tear based issues that are going to come back to bite you,
or flaring up your Achilles because all of a sudden it's lengthened back out. Yeah.
So and I think don't tolerate limping.
Don't tolerate limping. And during the moon boot or the ankle roll phase, you can actually do some work. You can get a trigger point ball and release at your hips. You can do double down on your hip flexor stretching to balance that out.
You can do glute bridging. I think that's one of the most. So glute bridging. The beautiful thing about take it back a step. So reciprocal inhibition is where when one muscle contracts, the other relaxes. And so if I contract my bicep, bring the arm up, the tricep has to release.
Otherwise, we'd be frozen solid.
Yeah, because all the muscles are just like
rigid all the time.
Yeah. And at the hip, that is the combination of hip flexor and glute. So the nice thing about a double leg glute bridge, and if you've got an athlete with a moon boot, you put a little heel wedge on the other side to make both sides even.
Bring them level, yep.
And you just do a simple bilateral glute bridge,
with a big squeeze at the top.
Really squeezing and really chasing that terminal hip extension without lumbar hyperextension or arching. 5 reps of that, 10 reps of that, and all of a sudden their hip flexors are releasing properly. That can make a big difference in terms of when they're ready to go, when the foot's or the ankle's actually ready.
We've sort of kept everything up to speed, strength-wise.
The hips haven't lost their acute to chronic workload ratio.
Of symmetry and balance and posture.
So that would be my takeaway is don't put up with it, don't push through limping. I think it's a false economy. And when you are having those sorts of issues, do a little bit of extra work to release off the tissues, stay active in a full range of motion where you can.
Yeah, and then once you're out of the boot, look at your dorsey, get your big toe working, maybe some toga.
Are you going to link to toga?
I'll link to toga, which is a video for yoga for your toes to get that big toe moving again and get everything loosened up through there.
Toga, classic.
Thanks, guys.